Hello, music lovers. Welcome to episode 69 of What Makes This Song Special. Happy New Year to everybody. I've taken a couple of weeks off. I left you with a wee Loch Lomond end of sort of just before New Year's Eve, a wee end of year Scottish traditional song. I also hit the 1,000 subscriber mark on Christmas Day, just at the very end of Christmas Day. I was keeping an eye on it, hoping for those 1,000 subscribers, just as a wee kind of benchmark, landmark moment. So thank you so much for everybody who watched last year and subscribed. It means a great deal. Hopefully get another couple of thousand people at least this year on board to listen to some stories about music, which is what we're going to do today. Talk about what makes a song special. To me, this is a very special song because it reminds me of what I'm going to tell you in the story. And then I'll do a part two where I'll do my own cover version of today's song, which is High Hopes by Pink Floyd. So we'll dive straight in. It was June 1999. And I was at the end of a huge chapter in my life. It was the end of school. School was finished forever. High school. And it had been something that I'd both hated in many moments and loved in others. I think like most of us, probably nobody loved or hated all of school. Or maybe some folk did, but that's probably the extremes. But I think most people, we loved moments of it. Probably hated many moments of it too. But I was never a kid that was really happy to go to school. I was never that kid who was like excited about the end of the summer holidays. You know, you get some strange people like that. My mum and dad had kind of made life at home so good that the thought of leaving that for a few hours every day really never really kind of enticed me. But having said that, I had some great friends at school, some that came and went, and others that, you know, a couple of them that stayed from the very beginning of primary school that I still see now. And, you know, as I've mentioned in previous stories on the channel, I'd been kind of, I suppose, discovered. I don't know if it was quite a discovery, but some, you know, the music teachers at William Wood High School, where I was at school in the south side of Glasgow, had kind of discovered that I could sing. And from that moment, which was maybe third or fourth year, sort of halfway through high school, until my very last day of my sixth and final year, I'd been sort of thrown into every musical venture that the school was involved in. Choirs, I was there. School show, I was there. Talent contests, I was there. You get the idea. And I'd been more into football and playing guitar before my voice became the sort of talking point of me and my peers. And so even if I said no to my music teachers when I was asked to sing, I'd find myself nervously present at these events that I'd never asked to be part of, rehearsals for things that I hadn't signed up for, talked into singing at things by pals, because people, by the time when people realise that you can, I suppose, do something that maybe some other people can't, they want you to show them. So I was always being asked to sing, and I'd find myself, you know, anxiously awaiting these performances all the time. And I suppose by the end of those performances, I was never regretful that I had been involved. But beforehand, I was always like thrown up and just being a complete nervous wreck. So anyway, back to the story. June 1999. I'd just finished playing the part of Kinnicky in Grease, which was one of the main parts in the musical, the Grease the musical. And it was my last school show, of course, last year of school. And that show had consumed so much of my time for so many months in the lead up. It had kept me up at night worrying that I would forget lines or miss a cue to step onto the stage or forget a costume change. And I had so many songs to sing and lines to say in the show and dances to remember, all those things. I can't dance, so that I was just terrified it wouldn't all come together. And our director, drama teacher, business studies teacher, an all-round connoisseur of musical theatre, Mr. Alex Muirhead, had put in so much effort to make this show something really special. It felt like more than just a school show. You know, he'd managed to get a real car onto the stage. And I don't know, I still to this day don't know how they managed that. I don't know if they sort of took it apart, brought it into the school in pieces and rebuilt it, or I don't know, I can't imagine where they would have managed to get a car into the school through a door wide enough. Anyway, there was a car, a real car for the Grease Lightning scene on the stage in the school. There were incredible props and lighting and everything. He pulled off just an amazing show. He invited cast members from the original show and movie to come and see us. I can't remember. I think, I can't remember if anybody from the original cast managed along, but many of us get signed pictures and things from, the people in the movie. I got a signed picture from the late great Jeff Conway, who played Kaneki in the movie. And it was just amazing. It really just felt like more than a school show. It was fantastic. And it become, this huge thing for all of us, because in the same way that all the characters in the show or the film, if you've seen Grease, they were all going through this thing that the late teens who are in their last year of high school are experiencing. And so were me and my friends. We were all leaving this big safe place that we'd often hated, and we were realising that maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe this was kind of a nice place to be for a while longer. Maybe we weren't ready to take that next step. Maybe school was the comfort blanket that we hadn't realised that we needed so much. And maybe the thought of the next chapter was a scary one for many of us. It certainly was for me. And we didn't want to go our separate ways and make new friends to the ones we'd grown up with every day. And I suppose the parallels between our lives and the lives of the characters we were playing in the show were so powerful that I remember when the curtains closed on the last night of our exhausting run of shows, which we'd done for the full week, that we'd worked so hard to bring together. And when the curtains came down, every single one of us just burst into tears. It was just this huge... I think that's quite a common thing to happen anyway at the end of a show, because it's such a big climactic finish to such a laborious few months of prep. But I think, given what I just said about it all paralleling our lives and things like that, the curtains closed and we all just cried, because it was like the end of school, the end of the show, the end of a chapter, the end of an era. Even the toughest amongst us were in tears. And it was just, like the euphoria of the performances and the imminent goodbyes to people that we knew we'd maybe never see again or lose touch with, that were moving off to different universities in different cities and countries and things like that. So it was all too much. We cried like babies. And it was just one of those moments in life that you just never forget. And the show had actually been our sort of last goodbye to the school. We'd actually all finished our exams a few weeks before the show. And we'd had our last class lessons with our teachers, and we'd been finished school for a number of weeks by this point. So the show performances were the last time we'd really need to be inside the school building. And for me, certainly, it was keeping me there. Going back without having to say goodbye. I just don't like change. And it was this emotional roller coaster, when the teachers had helped bring the show together behind the scenes. They were all helping out and stuff as well. And at the end of the show, a couple of them asked if anyone would volunteer to come in at the weekend to clear up all of the props and stage backgrounds and things like that. And I immediately offered. I immediately said that I would be up for coming in to help out. Not because I was trying to be the good guy or because I was really keen to help, but honestly because I just didn't want to leave. I wanted to be in school one last time, just the kind of nostalgia of it and stuff. So me and my mate Anthony Dempsey, who I've mentioned in a couple of episodes before, we arrived on the Saturday or the Sunday at the weekend. I can't remember which one, but the school was empty except for a few teachers and some other students who'd offered to come in. And my memory of that morning itself is a bit of a blur. I remember just binning lots of bits and pieces that were lying around everywhere, tidying up, walking around backstage with this sort of premature nostalgia for what I was about to miss in some weird way. And I walked through the assembly hall with a big kind of a bin bag, throwing in wigs and pom-poms and makeup and that type of thing that was all lying around from the show. And I don't remember the moment that I left the building, but I remember making the conscious decision that I was not going to phone my parents for a lift up the road. I wanted to walk. I just wanted to go and walk and sort of like, I don't know, process the end of this chapter. And my mate Anthony, he'd been trying to get me into Pink Floyd for ages. He'd been talking about Pink Floyd, and I wasn't really digging what I'd heard of Pink Floyd. It was a bit too, I don't know, proggy and a bit too progressive, a bit too, the songs were really long. It wasn't like songs that you're used to hearing. And yeah, I just couldn't get my head around it, and I wasn't really into it, and he kept on and on and on. And I remember him saying, if you're going to get into Pink Floyd, listen to the Division Bell album first. It wasn't one of their early albums. It was like a bit more pop, a bit less prog. And I think that's why he thought it might resonate with me more, because I was more into, I suppose, pop rock than sort of progressive 10-minute long songs and stuff like that. So he was right. He was absolutely right. I did fall in love with the album, and I don't know if I listened to much of the album before that day, but I remember that day putting my headphones on, pressing play, and just listening to the whole album from start to finish as I walked out of high school for the very last time. I walked out the back of the school, for anybody who knows Williamwood High School, up Sunnyside Drive in Clarkston, took a huge long route home, away, you know, a long route that took about an hour, and I listened to the entire album in its entirety on my headphones, full blast, in the pouring rain. It was like biblical rain pouring down, and I just wondered what was coming next in my life. Most of my mates were heading to different universities and colleges. Some of them were moving to other cities and countries, as I said before, and I was staying in Glasgow to take some years out of education to become, you know, a rock star. Was it the right idea? I had no idea. I was a terrified little 17-year-old boy with no idea in my head of what I really wanted to do. Even though I wanted to be a rock star, I didn't really want to be a rock star. I think that was kind of what I thought that I should try and be, but I was scared of that. I was scared of the future, the thought of being alienated by all my friends who were sort of taking different paths to me, going off to uni to make new friends, and all the bravado that I had and wore as my sort of protective shield in my latter school years was slowly falling off, and I was completely lost. And the Division Bell album played on that walk home on my headphones as I get more and more soaked. And yeah, by the time the last song came on, which is High Hopes, the incredible High Hopes, which we're going to do today, I was just an emotional wreck. There was really only one thing that I knew, and music was that thing. It was just that thing that did something to me that other things didn't, and I had to see where that went. I had to see where that was going to go. As scary and as lonely as a road that it maybe felt like at that moment, I just had to walk it and see what happened. And yeah, I suppose I had these high hopes, no pun intended, but these high hopes that something would come of it. And the song the album just kind of drove me into this amazing fantasy world in my head of what I was going to try and achieve. So yeah, there's my wee song, there's my wee story. That's why the song High Hopes, and that album in general, just the Division Bell album, that's why it's special to me. As always, leave a comment if you have a story of a reason why High Hopes is a special song to you. A little bit about the song. It's the last song, as I said, on the Division Bell album. An album that it was released in April 1994. It was Pink Floyd's 14th studio album, so incredible amount of albums that they managed to put together, and many kind of different incarnations of the band. It was the second album that they'd released after the departure of Roger Waters, and a lot of fans weren't happy that the other members of the band were continuing to release material under the Pink Floyd name without Roger Waters, because he was a founding member. That didn't stop the album going straight to number one in the UK and in the US, and as well as many other countries across Europe, across the globe. Most of the album was written by David Gilmour, who had been the lead guitarist in the band for many years, but was always sort of seen, I think, as the second vocalist after Waters, who was the bass player and sort of lead vocalist. And there were some songs also written or co-written in there with keyboardist Richard Wright. Richard Wright was back in the band for the second consecutive album at this point, after being outcast for many years after a fallout with Roger Waters whilst recording The Wall back in 1979. So he was back, David Gilmour, with some other musicians that they brought in, and another returning member of the team for a second consecutive album was Bob Ezrin, who co-produced the album with David Gilmour, and he'd also been the co-producer on The Wall. And I have to say, honestly, in my opinion, the production in the album, the Division Bell album, is absolutely sensational. It's worth a listen just for the production alone. It transforms you to another realm with these stunning reverbs and soundscapes, shoegazy guitars intertwined with this kind of unbelievably otherworldly sort of illustration of the lyrics, and it's a real feast on the ears sonically. It's amazing, really, really great. Is it as good? I suppose that's what I'm going to put in the tagline for the album, for the episode this week. Is it as good as the best Roger Waters era albums? Is it, what is Pink Floyd's greatest album? I suppose that's up to each individual person's opinion. I'm going to be hated for this because there are so many kind of, as I said before, a lot of people didn't see this as a real purist Pink Floyd album because Roger Waters isn't on it. For me, I think it's as good as their best stuff. I really do. I'm not saying that it's better than Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall, because those are such iconic albums that you can't really compare many albums to. I mean, I don't think you can compare because of the stature of those albums. But I do think that it deserves to be spoken about in the same league. I think musically, sonically, which is what Floyd were always famous for, was that kind of, otherworldly production that I spoke about a minute ago. I think it's in that league. I think I definitely think it's one of their best albums. It's one of my favourites. Waters or no Waters, I think it's a masterpiece. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know probably most people, as I said, will disagree with that. But I do think the Division Bells is up there. I think it's one of their best albums. I have obviously grown to love other Pink Floyd albums off the back of the Division Bell, so it was definitely a good introductory album for me. And if you're watching this and you've never listened to Pink Floyd, I think it's a good album, an entry album, an album to get you in there and sort of appreciate the sound a little bit before you get into the kind of some of the deeper stuff. The song High Hopes, as I said, it's my favourite on the album. The song itself is about growing up and looking back and realising what you've lost. I suppose the sort of inevitability of change and nostalgia, which fits perfectly, I suppose, into the day that I was listening to it in my story. It's about realising that you're always going to have dreams or achievements that will be unfulfilled, and although they did end up releasing a lot of other songs a few years later. They released another album of, I think a lot of the next album, which The Endless River, I'm sure it is, which is a lyric from High Hopes. I think a lot of that was kind of like bits of the Division Bell that didn't quite make it, and then they sort of fashioned it into another album a few years later. So I think as much as they did release stuff after the Division Bell and after High Hopes, I do feel like High Hopes is the end of Pink Floyd. It's like a goodbye. It's the sort of, the lyrics all sort of lead up to it being this sort of, they talk about the beginning, and then it's like the end of this amazing chapter, which again I'm sort of only realising now is another parallel for me of where I was in my life when I fell in love with the album. It was the end of a chapter, and maybe that's subconsciously where what I was feeling. That sort of kinship, if you like, with the album, So it also mentions all these cool little gems or Easter eggs, if you like, that refer to moments from the beginning of the band, places and people are referred to that fans of the band kind of would get cryptic clues from in the lyrics. Just a perfect track, stunning, beautiful track. So there you go, there's High Hopes. As always, I'll talk a wee bit about the singer's voice. Dave Gilmour. I mean, I have to, even though I'm going to speak about his voice, I have to speak about his guitar playing first and foremost, because that's what he's famous for. David Gilmour is one of the greatest guitar players in, pop rock history. Are there technically better guitarists in history? Absolutely, of course. But the feel, knowing what notes to hit, knowing when to play and when not to play, writing iconic parts and iconic solos. Just amazing. A guitar god. He's always in everybody's top 10 favourite guitarists, or anybody who's got half a brain. So an amazing guitar player. As a singer, he definitely was a guitar player who sang as opposed to being, a really great lead singer. But he did a great job. I think he did a great job on the early stuff where Roger Waters was more of the lead singer, and Gilmour sang some songs and some harmony parts and things like that. He always did a great job. He didn't have an amazing range in terms of, being able to get really high. But he's managed to have a very, very successful career, and sing some unbelievably famous songs that have resonated with millions of people across the world. So again, it comes down to that whole thing of technique versus style. I mean, it doesn't always have to be that you're the most technically gifted singer in the world. Can you have a cool voice and sing cool songs and be part of a really cool band and get away with being called a great singer? Absolutely, you can. I think he had a warmer voice than Rogers. Again, there's a lot of Rogers fans out there who will hate me for saying it, but I did prefer Dave Gilmour's voice to Roger Waters' voice. Just a personal preference level. But yeah, great. I really enjoy hearing Dave Gilmour sing, and I think his voice on the Division Bell album is consistently great throughout the album. Really good. So there we go. There's the end of today's episode. A little story about me leaving high school and feeling all nostalgic, chapters, all that stuff. I'll be back in a few seconds if you click up there on the upcoming tab to see my cover version of High Hopes, which is going to be just me and the piano. It's a bit of an interesting, different one to the original, certainly. If you're looking for vocal coaching, I've had loads of people contact me recently, which is brilliant, off the back of the videos, who are wanting help with their voices. Wonderful. I've been teaching singing for nearly 20 years now, so if you want to jump onto Skype, Zoom, or if you live in Glasgow and you want to come and see me face to face, get in touch. I can help you with your voice. Please like, subscribe, share, and tune in next week for another song and another story. Thanks so much.